You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show hearing from K-State and Washburn law professor Roger McEowen. Roger, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Shelby.
Roger, talking through a few different topics that could impact farmers and ranchers and their operations. And first, starting with a car loan interest deduction, and what is that?
Well, it's a new provision in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and it allows us to deduct for vehicles that are new, acquired after 2024, and it's only good for the next 4 years, 25, 26, 27, and 28. We've got a new code section that allows the deduction of up to $10,000 of interest on a personal vehicle, on a vehicle that's purchased for personal uses, as long as it's a qualified vehicle. So major points on that. A lot of vehicles are qualified, has to have at least two wheels under 14,000 pounds. It can be an SUV, a pickup truck. It can be an automobile. It can be a motorcycle. It can't be a horse-drawn buggy because that doesn't have the qualified emission systems on it. I got that question when I was speaking in Pennsylvania earlier this year, and the answer is no. Now, the other problem with that is Amish don't borrow money, so not very likely that you're going to have deductible interest in that situation. But this is a big deal, and so it's a new one. Actually, we had this up until the '86 Tax Act, and then they removed the deduction for personal car loan interest, but now it's back.
And so this started after 2024. So is this something, as we're towards the end of 2025, if someone has bought something that would qualify, they can go back and use it?
Well, it's for tax years that begin after December 31, 2024. So it'll be available for loans taken out on new vehicles that qualify starting this year. So that means on the tax returns that will be prepared this coming tax season for purchases in 2025. Now, one other thing I didn't mention is the final assembly point must be in the United States. So you got to be careful on this. You need to, if you're going to buy a vehicle, you need to have the dealer run the VIN number so that you can verify that it was actually coming from an American final assembly plant, a place in the U.S. And an example on this, for example, you could have sitting on a lot two, for instance, Chevy Silverados that come to mind here because of the point I'm illustrating, that look exactly the same color, same bells and whistles. It's a brand new 25 model, has same options on it, identical truck. One of them is made at final assembly plant is Fort Wayne, Indiana truck plant, and the other one is Windsor, Ontario truck plant. Only the one that was finally assembled in Fort Wayne, Indiana would qualify. The other one would not qualify. So you have to be very careful in these situations to make sure that the final assembly point is in the United States.
Is this something then they just need to chat with their tax professional about to make sure it does get incorporated?
Well, at the purchase point, I would say this, to have the dealer verify, run that VIN number, and sometimes there's a label on a door jamb that will list final assembly point. But those are two ways to verify that. And then the tax preparer knows that interest would be deductible.
Roger, how might this be different than for if a farmer or rancher versus just a normal citizen might use?
Well, yeah, that's a good question, because if I'm a farmer and I buy a pickup truck, a new pickup truck this year for my farm, there is a provision in the code. It's an existing provision that if I'm using it 75% for business use, there's a safe harbor. And so if I want to use this new provision along with 75% business use, and so it's 25% personal, the way that interest gets allocated is 75% goes to the Schedule F. The remaining 25% of the interest is allowed as a deduction on the new Schedule 1A, which we already have a draft form of. So that's how it's going to be actually handled on the return.
Roger, while we're thinking about changes, is there a change when it comes to an encouragement to maybe help regrow the cattle herd?
Yeah, I think there is, and that's the restoration of the 100% bonus depreciation for assets that are acquired and placed in service on or after January 20 of this year. And the way I see that is, of course, what's been happening in the beef herd is we're at historically small levels. And so there's been a lot of attention focused on beef prices recently. Well, it's a supply-demand issue largely. And the latest data indicates that beef replacement heifer inventory, so those female cattle that are being held back to become the future of the breeding herd, is at its lowest point on record with overall cattle numbers hitting their smallest mid-year count since the 1970s. So you add that in with some other factors. Let's say you get persistent drought, you get high input costs. Now you're going to have a supply crunch. So what the restoration of 100% bonus does is it could be used to incentivize the purchase of breeding stock, because breeding stock is eligible to be bonused. It's also eligible for Section 179. But now, instead of having 40% bonus depreciation this year, you can take the whole thing. As long as that becomes a mature animal this year, then that's what the IRS says in terms of when a heifer is placed in service. It has to be mature, ready to be bred. And then you could claim 100% bonus on that. So you're front loading the depreciation. That'll reduce the taxable income for the livestock producer in the year of the purchase, which in turn would then reduce tax liability. And so that those tax savings would increase the cash flow of that livestock producer. And so when we put that in the context of herd growth, what I'm saying is that extra cash could be immediately reinvested into buying more replacement heifers and developing infrastructure or covering operating costs associated with retaining and managing a larger herd. So what I think this does is incentivize building the heifer herd faster than would otherwise happen without the OBBBA provision.
Do you think it's going to help?
Well, it's part of a whole decision-making process in terms of if I'm going to buy breeding heifers. It's a powerful financial tool, but herd growth is pretty complex. You've got biological and management challenges, and so you have to have an overall planning strategy. So your cull rate is key. The genetics, in terms of genetic selection, that's key. Reproductive efficiency, that's also important. So what is your calving window, and how do you maximize the number of calves per cow in a year? That's crucial too. So, but the thing that's nice on this is the bonus depreciation change is effective starting January 20th of this year. That's important, I think, with respect to heifers, because if I can get heifers bred early in the season, it increases the likelihood they'll rebreed the following year. So number of factors together, all I'm saying is this isn't going to hurt anything, and it could actually help build the heifer herd faster than otherwise would be the case.
And I'm sure you've been getting questions on this, and a recent question you have gotten involving depreciation recapture, and can you share with us the details of that question?
Yeah, this came in from a CPA. This was in Iowa, and they had inherited a client that had several hog confinement buildings purchased back in 2020, and one of those was purchased for $800,000, and they set it up as 10-year MACRS property for depreciation purposes, and they bonused it out. Now, at that time, bonus depreciation was 100%, so they deducted the full cost of that building in 2020, but that eliminates your income tax basis. That's kind of the trade-off here. You're getting all your depreciation in year one. You don't have anything left because you've lost your basis. Now, what he wants to do in 2025, the CPA that wrote me, said that the client wants to sell it this year. It still is worth $800,000, but he has no basis. And now the problem you run into on that, and the question specifically that he posed is the character of that gain what we call Section 1245 ordinary income recapture, even though it's real property, which would be under a different rule. Well, we've got a recharacterization rule in the code that says for single purpose ag structures, which is what this is, it does get recharacterized as 1245 ordinary gain on recapture. So the bottom line result for that hog producer is that he'll have $800,000 of ordinary income taxed at his ordinary income rates, not capital gain. And that's a big penalty. And so there's really no way out of that except for death. But he might have to rethink his strategy as to whether he wants to sell that building this year. So
what could have helped him avoid that?
Well, that's one of the things you have to realize when you do take bonus depreciation or even a large chunk of Section 179 depreciation. You have to drop your basis by the amount claimed. So if you dispose of that asset, you're going to trigger tax, and you're probably going to trigger tax at ordinary income rates, which could be bad. And so, again, this strategy of selling this hog confinement building has to be part of an overall strategy with other things that you're doing from a tax standpoint to make sure that you're not creating a major problem for yourself in that particular tax year. So that is, tax is complex, and you've got to consider a whole host of things, because if you, for example, push one button over here, this tax button may trigger 2 or 3 other tax buttons that we need to be managing at the same time. So try not to do things in isolation. Get good tax advice in advance to determine what's best overall.
If people want to read more on these topics, Roger, how can they do that?
These right now are posted to my Substack. That's McEowenaglawandtax.substack.com. I'll probably spin some of these out at some point in time and post them to Ag Manager, but I don't have them there yet. But on the road a lot. We're in the midst of tax schools now, but I'll eventually get to it.
Roger, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having me, Shelby.
That was K-State and Washburn Law Professor Roger McEowen.